Are you absolutely sure your fertility is safe right now, or could it be quietly declining without a single warning sign? I ask this because, as a physician, I've sat across from countless men who believed everything was fine until one test changed the conversation forever, and what shocked them most was not the result, but how long the problem had been developing in silence. I want you to understand something important from the very start. Low sperm quality doesn't announce itself with pain or obvious symptoms. It hides behind busy schedules, late-night stress, and habits that feel harmless, but slowly interfere with the body's most delicate processes. In my clinical work, I've seen how fear sets in the moment men realize this isn't about masculinity. It's about biology, hormones, and daily choices that can either weaken or restore reproductive health. But here's the turning point, and this is why you should keep watching. Many of the most damaging factors are also the easiest to correct once you know where to look. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how that shift begins. I want to start with something I see again and again in my clinic, because this is often the first place where things quietly go wrong. Many men sit in front of me convinced their fertility problem came out of nowhere, but when we trace the timeline back, a pattern almost always appears: years of minimal movement, long hours sitting, and a body that slowly stops sending the right hormonal signals. From a medical standpoint, sperm production is not just about the testicles. It's about circulation, metabolism, and hormones working together like gears in a machine. When physical activity drops, testosterone levels tend to follow. In fact, a 2017 clinical study showed that after just 16 weeks of regular exercise, overweight men experienced a significant improvement in both sperm count and sperm motility, largely because testosterone levels increased. I often explain this to patients. Using a simple image exercise is like turning the ignition key of the reproductive system. Without it, the engine may still exist, but it never fully warms up or runs efficiently. What's important here is that I'm not talking about extreme workouts or punishing routines. In my experience, the men who benefit the most are not marathon runners, but those who become consistently active after years of being sedentary. Moderate strength training, brisk walking, or cycling improves blood flow to the pelvic region and sends a clear biological message to the body that it's time to optimize hormone production again. This is where fear turns into control, because this is one of the few factors men can change quickly. I've watched patients feel helpless when they hear the words low sperm count, and then regain confidence when they realize that movement alone can shift their biology within weeks, not years. But here's the part most people don't expect, and this is why you should keep listening. Exercise helps, but only if another daily habit isn't silently canceling out all of its benefits, and that's what we need to talk about next. After movement, the very next place I look, and this surprises many men, is sleep, because I've seen strong exercise habits completely undone by what happens at night. I often hear patients say, "Doctor, I work out, I eat fairly well, so why are my numbers still low?" And when I ask one simple question, how many hours do you actually sleep and when do you go to bed, the room usually goes quiet. From a biological perspective, sleep is when the reproductive system does its deepest repair work. Testosterone, the hormone that directly supports sperm production, is released in pulses during deep sleep, especially in the early part of the night. When sleep is cut short or pushed too late, that hormonal rhythm starts to fracture. Research backs this up in a way that's hard to ignore. Studies have shown that men who sleep fewer than 6 hours per night consistently have poorer sperm quality than those who sleep 7 to 8 hours. And interestingly, sleeping too long, over 9 hours, can also disrupt sperm health. I explain this to patients with a simple analogy. Sleep is like a factory's night shift. If workers leave early or show up at random hours, production slows and quality control drops. Going to bed very late, even if total sleep time seems okay, often shortens the most hormone-rich phases of sleep, and that's where the damage quietly happens. What makes this especially dangerous is how invisible it feels. You don't wake up feeling infertile. You might just feel a little foggy, a little tired, and assume it's normal. But in my clinical experience, correcting sleep, going to bed earlier, protecting 7 to 8 hours, and keeping a consistent schedule has led to measurable improvements in sperm parameters within months, sometimes even sooner. This is where fear starts turning into leverage because sleep is not about effort. It's about timing and consistency. And here's the critical transition you need to hear. Even perfect sleep won't fully protect sperm if the mind stays in a constant state of pressure, because the next factor quietly attacking fertility doesn't happen in the bedroom, it happens in the nervous system, and that's what we're about to uncover next. There's one factor I bring up carefully with patients because it doesn't feel physical at first yet. It can quietly overpower everything we've talked about so far, and that's chronic stress. I've watched men exercise regularly and finally fix their sleep, yet their sperm numbers barely move, and the missing piece often turns out to be constant mental pressure. From a medical standpoint, stress isn't just in your head. It triggers the release of cortisol, a hormone that directly interferes with testosterone production and sends a signal to the body that survival matters more than reproduction. In simple terms, when the brain thinks you're under threat, fertility becomes a low priority. Long-term studies make this connection very clear. One large observational study followed nearly 200 men over several years and found that those reporting higher life stress consistently showed lower sperm concentration and poorer motility. I explain this to patients using an everyday comparison. Imagine trying to grow a delicate plant while someone keeps shaking the soil. No matter how good the sunlight or water is, the roots never fully settle. Stress does the same thing to the reproductive system. It keeps the body in a constant state of alert, never allowing the hormonal environment needed for healthy sperm development to stabilize. What makes stress especially dangerous is how normalized it's become. Many men tell me, this is just my life, work pressure, financial stress, family responsibility. But in clinical practice, even small changes, structured breathing, regular downtime, or simply learning how to switch off mentally at night have led to measurable improvements in sperm quality. This is where fear begins to loosen its grip, because stress is not about weakness. It's about biology responding to overload. And here's the critical pivot you need to hear. Next, even if you manage movement, sleep, and stress perfectly, there are substances many men consume without thinking that can quietly undo all of that progress. And that's exactly what we need to address next. This is the point where many men shift uncomfortably in their chair because the next factor feels personal, familiar, and often underestimated: alcohol, smoking, and recreational drugs. I want to be very clear here, speaking from clinical evidence, not judgment. In my practice, I've seen men who do everything else right: exercise, sleep, stress management, yet their sperm parameters remain stubbornly low. When we review lifestyle details more honestly, substances that seemed moderate or social often emerge as the silent disruptors. From a biological standpoint, alcohol and nicotine increase oxidative stress, damage sperm DNA, and interfere with hormone signaling that governs sperm production. The research on this is remarkably consistent. Multiple studies show that regular alcohol consumption is associated with lower sperm concentration and poorer motility, while smoking has been linked to higher rates of abnormal sperm shape and DNA fragmentation. I often explain it this way to patients. Sperm cells are like precision-built messengers, and substances such as alcohol and tobacco act like corrosive noise in the system. Even when intake doesn't feel excessive, repeated exposure sends the testes a confusing signal, reducing both the quality and reliability of sperm over time. Recreational drugs add another layer, disrupting the brain-testes communication pathway that regulates testosterone and sperm maturation. What makes this especially deceptive is timing. Men don't feel an immediate consequence the next morning, so the habit feels harmless. But in clinical follow-ups, I've watched sperm quality improve noticeably within months after reducing or eliminating these substances, even without other major changes. That's where fear turns into agency again, because this isn't about perfection. It's about removing obstacles the body can't work around. And here's the crucial transition you need to stay with me for. Even when these habits are addressed, there's another overlooked influence. Certain medications that many men never realize could be quietly affecting fertility. And that's exactly what we'll uncover next. This is where many men feel blindsided, because the next factor isn't a bad habit. It's something their doctor may have prescribed with good intentions. In my clinical work, I've had patients look genuinely shocked when we discover that certain medications can quietly affect sperm production. From a medical perspective, this doesn't mean these drugs are bad or unnecessary, but it does mean they can influence the delicate hormonal and cellular processes involved in fertility. Medications, such as some antidepressants, anti-seizure drugs, specific antibiotics, chemotherapy, agents, and anabolic steroids, have all been linked in research to reduced sperm count, motility, or normal shape. I often explain this using a simple comparison. Medication is like adjusting the settings on a control panel in the body. You may be fixing one important problem, but if those settings stay altered for too long, other systems can be affected as a side effect. Studies have shown, for example, that certain antidepressants can alter sperm DNA integrity, while long-term steroid use can suppress the body's own testosterone production, essentially telling the testes to slow down or stop sperm production altogether. This is not something men can feel happening, which is why it's so easy to miss until a fertility test raises questions. What I always emphasize to patients is this: never stop a medication on your own. The real solution is awareness and conversation. In many cases, dose adjustments, alternative treatments, or timing changes can reduce the impact on fertility without compromising overall health. I've seen sperm parameters improve simply because a man finally asked the right question and worked with his physician to rebalance the system. And here's the transition you need to stay with me for. Even when medications are optimized, there's another invisible influence affecting men every single day, something in the air around them, and that's what we're going to talk about next. There's another influence many men never think to mention because it feels completely out of their control, and that's environmental exposure. I often hear patients say, "Doctor, I don't drink much, I don't smoke, I exercise and sleep better now. So why are my results still borderline?" And this is where I gently shift the conversation outward beyond personal habits. From a medical standpoint, the male reproductive system is highly sensitive to toxins in the environment, especially air pollution and industrial chemicals. These exposures increase oxidative stress and inflammation, which directly affect sperm count movement and DNA quality. Large population studies have made this link increasingly clear. Research published in recent years has shown that men living in areas with high air pollution, particularly near industrial zones or heavy traffic, tend to have lower sperm concentrations compared to those in cleaner environments. I explain this to patients with a simple image. Sperm cells are like finely tuned instruments, and polluted air acts like constant background static. The body may adapt in many ways, but reproductive cells are among the first to show damage because they are constantly being produced and renewed. What makes this factor especially unsettling is the sense of helplessness it creates. You can't see polluted air, and you can't always choose where you live or work. But this is where fear can turn into strategy. In clinical practice, small protective steps improving indoor air quality, reducing exposure during peak pollution hours, supporting the body's antioxidant defenses have made measurable differences over time. I've seen patients regain a sense of control simply by understanding what they're up against and how to buffer its effects. And here's the next shift you need to stay with me for. Even when we can't change the environment immediately, there are nutrients that help the body defend sperm at a cellular level. And that's exactly where we're heading next. One of the most overlooked defenses I talk about with patients comes down to something incredibly simple yet biologically powerful: vitamins, specifically vitamin D and vitamin C. I often meet men who assume supplements are just extras, but from a medical perspective, certain micronutrients act more like protective armor for sperm cells. Vitamin D, for example, isn't just about bones. Research has shown it plays a role in sperm motility and hormonal signaling, and men with low vitamin D levels often show weaker sperm movement. I explain it this way: vitamin D works like a traffic signal for sperm without it. They exist, but they don't move with direction or purpose. Vitamin C works on a different front, and this is where things get critical. Sperm cells are extremely vulnerable to oxidative stress, meaning damage caused by free radicals from pollution smoking history, poor diet, or even chronic stress. Vitamin C is a powerful antioxidant that helps neutralize that damage. Studies have found that adequate vitamin C intake is associated with higher sperm count and better sperm integrity. In clinical conversations, I describe oxidative stress as rust forming on delicate machinery. Vitamin C doesn't just slow the rust, it helps prevent it from forming in the first place. What's important here is balance, not excess. I've seen patients improve sperm parameters simply by correcting deficiencies through diet sunlight exposure or medically guided supplementation, not megadoses. This is where anxiety softens into confidence because nourishing the body is far less intimidating than fighting it. And here's the reason you'll want to keep listening even with the right vitamins on board: sperm health still depends heavily on the type of fats fueling the body every day. And some fats quietly help, while others sabotage everything we've built so far. When we move past vitamins, the next conversation I always have with patients is about fat. And this is where many men get confused because not all fats behave the same way in the body. From a medical perspective, sperm cells are built largely from fatty membranes, which means the type of fat you eat literally becomes part of the structure of those cells. In my clinical work, I've seen men focus intensely on protein or supplements while completely overlooking fats, not realizing they're fueling sperm with the wrong raw materials. Healthy unsaturated fats, especially omega-3 fatty acids, play a direct role in sperm flexibility, movement, and overall integrity. Research consistently supports this. Multiple review studies have shown that omega-3 supplementation is associated with improved sperm motility and morphology. I often explain this with a simple image. Patients immediately understand sperm need to swim and their tails are like tiny engines. Omega-3s keep those engines flexible and responsive, while diets high in unhealthy fats make sperm membranes stiff and inefficient. Foods like flaxseed, chia seeds, and walnuts provide omega-3s in a form the body can actually use to support reproductive cells, not just cardiovascular health. What makes this shift powerful is how practical it feels. I've watched men regain a sense of control when they realize that small dietary swaps, adding a handful of walnuts or seeds instead of processed snacks, can change sperm quality over time. This is where fear turns into momentum because nutrition becomes a daily opportunity, not a restriction. And here's the key transition. You need to stay with me for even with the right fats on board, sperm are still under constant attack from invisible cellular damage. And the next factor determines whether they survive that fight or slowly lose it. At this stage, I usually pause and tell patients something that reframes everything we've discussed so far. Even if hormones are improving, sleep is better, and nutrition is cleaner, sperm are still fighting a microscopic battle every single day. That battle is against oxidative stress, and this is where antioxidants quietly become one of the most powerful allies in male fertility. From a medical perspective, oxidative stress damages sperm, DNA weakens movement and shortens sperm lifespan. I explain it in everyday terms. Like this sperm are produced constantly, but they're fragile, and free radicals act like tiny sparks that slowly burn holes in their structure if nothing puts the fire out. Clinical research has repeatedly shown that diets rich in antioxidants are associated with better sperm concentration, motility, and DNA integrity. Fruits and vegetables, especially those rich in vitamin C, vitamin E polyphenols, and carotenoids, help neutralize free radicals before they cause lasting damage. In practice, I've seen men focus heavily on supplements while ignoring this foundation. But the patients who improve most consistently are often the ones who simply increase real colorful plant foods. I describe antioxidants to them as a daily shield, not a one-time fix. You don't notice it working, but over weeks and months, it changes the internal environment where sperm develop. What makes this factor so empowering is its simplicity. You're not fighting your body, you're supporting it. When patients understand that every meal can either protect sperm or leave them exposed, anxiety begins to give way to intentional choices. And here's the crucial transition you need to hear next. Even with antioxidants defending sperm from damage, there's one dietary factor many men consume, thinking it's harmless or even healthy. Yet, it can subtly interfere with sperm balance if overdone, and that's exactly what we'll talk about next. There's one final dietary detail I bring up near the end of these conversations because it often catches men off guard: foods that quietly mimic estrogen in the body. From a medical standpoint, male fertility depends on a delicate hormonal balance, and when that balance is tipped even slightly, sperm production can suffer. I'm talking specifically about phytoestrogens, plant compounds that can act like weak estrogens, most notably found in soy-based foods. Many of my patients are surprised by this because soy is often marketed as a healthy choice, and in moderation it can be, but context and quantity matter. Research suggests that high intake of phytoestrogens may influence hormone signaling related to sperm production, particularly when consumed frequently and in large amounts. I explain it with a simple analogy. Patients immediately understand hormones work like messages on a private channel. When too many similar signals crowd that channel, the original message gets distorted. In clinical practice, I've seen men with borderline hormone profiles improve after simply reducing excessive soy products and returning to a more balanced, varied diet. This isn't about fear or elimination. It's about avoiding extremes that the body wasn't designed to handle daily. What I emphasize most is perspective. There is no single food that magically restores sperm health, and there's no single food that destroys it overnight. The strongest results come from balanced, diverse nutrients, steady habits, and consistency over time. When men stop chasing shortcuts and start building supportive routines, the body often responds better than expected. And here's why you'll want to stay until the very end. When all of these pieces come together, the transformation isn't just measurable on a lab report. It's something men can feel in their confidence, their control, and their future. And that's what I want to leave you with next. Before we close, I want to bring everything we've talked about back to one clear message. Male reproductive health doesn't collapse overnight, and it doesn't recover overnight either. It's shaped by daily signals, how you move, how you sleep, how you manage stress, what you consume, and what you're exposed to over time. From a medical perspective, what gives me the most hope is that sperm health is remarkably responsive when those signals change. I've seen men feel powerless after a lab result and then regain confidence when they realize their body is not broken. It's responding exactly as biology predicts. And that means it can respond again in a better direction. If you're watching this and feeling concerned, I want you to know this. You're not late and you're not alone. Asking questions, learning, and making small, consistent adjustments is already a form of taking control. You don't need perfection. What matters is awareness and steady action. That's how real change begins, both medically and emotionally. If this video helped you understand your body a little better, do yourself a favor and save it so you can come back to it when you need clarity or reassurance. And if you want to keep receiving clear, science-based guidance about male reproductive health hormones and long-term vitality, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. Now, I'd really like to hear from you. What part of this topic surprised you the most, or what question has been on your mind that no one has answered clearly yet? Let me know in the comments, because your questions often shape the next conversation we have here.